Hi, everyone. Welcome again to the Graduate Mentor. I hope you can enjoy our next guest, Vicente Gonzalez. He's been a tremendous friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. He's got great insight, great experiences, and a lot of wisdom to share with you. I hope you enjoy it, learn a lot from it, and if you have any questions, comment below. All right. Well, Vicente, Dr. Gonzalez now?
Yeah, Dr. Gonzalez.
Yeah. Um, Welcome to the Graduate Mentor. As we were talking about earlier, this platform is to help upcoming students and current students navigate through academia, help them through any issues that they might have been going through, understand that they're not the only ones going through these issues, and understand that this is a journey and that you have to take one step at a time.
Mhm.
It's never a straight line, and that is going to be curveballs, and we can figure out a way to solve those curveballs. So, Vicente, can you tell me a little bit about your background? Um, what sparked your interest in physics?
You know, I've always said that physics isn't something that a lot of people choose per se. It kind of chooses you. When I was growing up, I always, well, my dad worked for National Instruments, and he took me to, they had like an annual tech conference kind of thing. And one of the guest speakers was Dr. Michio Kaku, the guy you
Oh,
see
wow.
on the Science Channel all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, it was amazing. And he just talked about how physics is going to shape the future and the technology at the time. And it was really inspiring. And, I stayed up all night watching how the universe works, all those other different things. And I just wanted to be able I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to understand how things work on a fundamental level. And that's why I chose physics.
And that's so interesting. So, what was the path that you take to? At what point did you decide that you wanted to do science? Was there any science when you were growing up that kind of you had a tendency for that?
I think that I always liked building things. So like kind of from there, I thought, oh, I'm going to be an engineer. I want to be an electrical engineer like my dad because he built computers. And when I got there, when I was like 16, I had a physics teacher in high school. His name was just very standard, Mr. Smith. But
Right.
yeah, right. But he did a lot. His teaching style was really cool. We did labs and just the way he taught. That's when you have a good teacher, you become passionate about something.
That's
And
true. I had professors like that in my career that, man, they just reached that passion out.
exactly. And so when he taught my AP Physics 1 class, I loved it, and I thought this is for me. And that's when I knew I wanted to do physics too. Um, and then from there, I got into UTSA and I tried to do a physics and a dual physics engineering major.
Wow. So you went to the University of Texas in San Antonio.
That's correct. Yeah, University of Texas, San Antonio.
Okay. So in your high school career, how pivotal was it for you, or how helpful was it for you to take a lot of science classes, math classes before you went into the university? Or for those students who are seniors or juniors and are just now starting to take science, what's the difference and
I
how
think
useful could it be?
Right. No, that's a great question. I think that it was very useful for me because one, by taking a lot of those AP math and science classes, it allowed me to get a really solid foundation before I went there. When you take, basic chemistry and, algebra based, or actually in my case, it was calculus based physics one, and you kind of already have an idea of what's going on.
Mhm.
But even if you don't do that, there's still a pathway for you. If you're just now discovering science and as your junior or senior year and you don't have the opportunity to take those AP classes or advanced science classes, there's pathways for you to do that when you go to university. You just start a little lower. You just do either algebra based physics one, or they just kind of, there's like intro to physics classes that'll help give you bridge that gap. And so there's definitely pathways for whenever you discover science.
Yeah, there's always that feeling that you may be starting late and you people are coming in with a low self-esteem because they see all their peers going, oh yeah, I'm taking physics too, and they're a freshman, or I'm taking thermodynamics and I just started here because I took all these other classes. What would you tell to those students who are just getting started and not having that background?
Everybody has a journey. Everybody starts somewhere. And just because you didn't start when those other people did doesn't mean that you're a bad scientist or you're not going to be as good a scientist as them. No, you just build up from where you are at the moment. You take those introductory classes and, just your determination is what's going to determine the outcome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And you started with your undergraduate in physics and engineering, but you kept going. You ended up with a PhD after so many years.
Mm-hmm.
What motivated you to go from bachelor? Because you could have gotten a background, a job in industry after your bachelor's degree. So what motivated you to pursue a PhD?
Well, I'll start with this because I'm going to make this a very long-winded answer. I did not finish my dual engineering physics. I found that it was a little overwhelming because not only did I do dual engineering and physics majors, but I also tried to do a music minor because I was very passionate about music and band and actually marched my first 2 years at UTSA. But with all these three different directions, I got lost.
Wow.
Yeah, I got very lost and overwhelmed. And funny enough, at the end of my second year, I had just about a 2.0 GPA because I was so overwhelmed. And I said, okay, stop what you're doing. I stopped marching band, and I do regret that to this day. But I also got rid of the engineering major to focus solely on physics, which to me was my passion. And then from there, I built my way up. And wow, and I always say this to people, and they always almost look down on me, but I don't feel like it's something I should be unproud of. I went from a 2.0 GPA and I finished my PhD or my bachelor's in physics with a 2.86 GPA.
Mhm.
That's not
Yeah.
typically something you think of a PhD student.
Yeah.
But the difference for me is my junior year when I started taking, the classical mechanics one, and the modern physics classes, those upper level physics classes. I met the department chair at the time. I talked to him because he was teaching the class, and I said, I want lab experience. I just kind of want to be able to get a feel for what that's like. And he let me into his lab, and he introduced me to nanotechnology, which was I didn't even know existed at the time. I think you hear that word like in the Marvel universe or something like that occasionally.
Yeah.
But he put me in touch with one of his grad students and said, "Hey, take him, help him make a sample. It was just silver nanowires." And then we went and looked at an electron microscope, the big one, the arm, the huge super. You can see each individual atom, and oh my gosh, it blew my
Okay.
mind.
Wow.
It blew my mind that you could actually look at something on an atomic level and see that each individual atom. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget that. And I thought, okay, this I want to do my PhD. And I did a lot of work there. I helped some of their current PhDs finish their work, and that impressed my advisor, or I wouldn't call him my advisor yet, but that impressed the department chair enough to give me an opportunity to pursue my PhD. He told me, you should do this. You can do this. And so I applied, got in, and he let me into his lab from the get-go.
Man, this is powerful. This your story really makes a difference. You know that how so many people are out there that right now they feel like they're in the lowest point in their life because especially students, we are so emotional as young adults, and we are so we get impressed upon by our surroundings, but what people say, but by our experiences, if something bad happens to us or we lag behind, we just crash hard. Unless, it depends from person to person. But there's a lot of people that may not think that they can come out of that.
Mhm.
And so what was that turning point for you? At what point in those 4 years did you say, well, enough is enough? This is where I'm at right now. I have to get myself out of this and I have to make it a turning point. I need to find that turning point in my life. What was that moment for you?
I'm very lucky to have had a very supportive group of parents. My parents have always been there for me. And I remember they would always text me or check on me the first couple, every semester. I'm like, hey, how's your classes going? And, here I am having just dropped Fortran for the second time. And I would text, oh, everything's great. Yeah, I'm passing this class and everything is going good. But then at one point they're like, what's your GPA? Like, how are you actually doing? Because they saw me mentally stressed.
Mhm.
And they held what I would call it like a mini intervention. It was out on their porch. I remember it was on their porch at night, and they said, Vincent, we love you, we support you. but you need to get your stuff together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, you right now on this path you're on, you're not going to make it. And some really nice, well deserved words were said, and I just put it together, you know. And I mean, and because they're asking me, what do you even want? I think that's the big key. What do you want?
Yeah.
And I don't think I knew how to answer it at the time.
Yeah, you had three different paths. You could have gone through the music route,
Mm-hmm.
engineering, or science. And now that's interesting. You had to pick a path. So what made you choose physics over the other two?
I think I chose physics because deep down that was always the most interesting thing to me. I mean those were the shows that I watched, and when when I asked myself, okay, engineering or physics, because I never really thought music was just fun for me. Um, my heart said physics, so I went with my heart. You know,
Good.
because if I chose engineering, I think I'd have been sad.
Mm-hmm. So for you to take a path this difficult, you needed to have some kind of passion. You needed to have a purpose, is what
Mhm.
you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I needed to know what I wanted in life. And I think still at the time, I don't think I had a clear answer for what that was yet. So don't feel bad if you don't. But I knew in my heart that I wanted to be a physicist and I wanted to work on something important. I think a big goal of mine, and it became a little clearer as I met the department chair and he gave me the opportunity in his lab. I wanted something that to make a mark, something that would last forever. And
Mm-hmm.
then I thought, oh, well, if I get my PhD, I'm gonna publish. And once that's published, it's never going away. Someone could look at it forever and ever and ever. And
Right.
so I'm like, okay, let's publish a paper.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what got me going.
So that actually takes me to my next point here. So your dissertation focuses on developing nickel tyrosine nanowire arrays for glucose detection.
Mhm.
So for people like me that have no idea what that is, can you break it down in simple terms? What was your research about?
Okay. So essentially, I developed my own glucose biosensor. Now, think of it this way. You know, standard diabetic procedure, people know if you have diabetes, you need to check your glucose levels to know when you need to take your insulin, when to take your medicine, or when to eat and not eat. And so the most common method and the most cheap method is to prick your finger. You prick your finger, gather the blood on the strip, and then put the strip into the little detector, and then it'll tell you what your glucose level is. Okay, great. Well, I wanted to make my own version of that because there's a lot of drawbacks to the current one. The strips have inconsistent shelf lives. The readings are sometimes inconsistent from strip to strip. And if you leave your strips in a hot car, they go bad. And you may not even know it. You know, you might be getting false readings. So I thought, well, how can I fix this? Well, I said I can develop my own using standard or using physical concepts as my guide, such as electrochemistry, you know, circuits and uh, Ohm's law to make my own. And then I needed to say, okay, uh, what do I want to make it out of? Well, right now they use enzymes, and these enzymes are expensive. You know, these strips cost anywhere from 10 to sometimes even 50 cents to $1 per strip. What can I you do that would be more accessible for people? Well, I just made it out of a cheap metal called nickel, you know,
Mm-hmm.
very cheap, very cheap. And
Like coins, basically.
exactly. And then I utilized tools that I learned in the lab that I was in at the time to make nickel nanowires, ordered arrays, which I can go into a little deeper later. And then to make the sensor last longer and potentially reusable, what I did was I got a natural biopolymer called chitosan, which is found in mushrooms and crab shells. And I broke it down chemically into its pure uh, deprotonated chitosan, coated my stick with it, and showed the improvement that it had on the sensor detection. And that was my project.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Right.
So in this journey, what were some of your biggest challenges that you encountered?
Okay, that's like such a good question because there's so many. I will start with the academic challenges and then the personal challenges. So by at that point, I never had any problems in class. I think that, you know, when you do your PhD, you do the core four, stat mech, quantum, classical mechanics, and what's the
Thermodynamics?
electrodynamics. Sorry, it's been so long. I started in 2016. And I got three A's and a B, which is above average because they really only require you to do two and two A, two B's. But anyways, so the classes were fine, but it was the research that was very difficult for me to start. I had a head start. I already had an advisor and I was already in a lab. But that doesn't mean that I knew how to develop my own project yet. And my advisor, being the department chair, was kind of distant. He had a lot of other obligations. And then one day I show up and my lab key doesn't work anymore. I thought, oh, this is interesting. I can't even get into my own lab. I have a backpack in there. You know where I'm going with this. And I'm not going to be super specific, but basically that advisor was placed on academic leave.
Oh
And
no.
that I had to start over. And
You had to change advisors?
yes, just completely scrap everything I was working on because even the tools that I was working on at the time were on lockdown for, gosh, at least a year, you know?
Wow. So you
Yeah.
couldn't find another lab that had similar techniques so that you could continue your work there?
I would love to because at the time I was working with copper thin films.
Uh-huh.
Basically, I had this really specific thermal evaporator called the Covamex that deposited metals very, very, very slowly on the order of like an angstrom per at several seconds. So you had a lot of control.
Wow. So
Yeah, you
that
had
is not a cheap tool to just come around. Oh yeah,
no,
my neighbor has it.
exactly, not
Right.
at all. So luckily, I knew another professor that I already kind of understood what his work was. I went to his lab and he tentatively let me in. And that went really well. That professor, while our personalities kind of were mismatched, was exactly what I needed. That person helped me understand what conducting science actually was, develop a hypothesis, make it testable, run the test, and be able to analyze the data and come to a conclusion. You learn that since fifth grade when they're starting to, when they introduce that in science classes, but that's really freaking important. That
Mhm.
doesn't go away, especially if you do science. So that was going great. I had a project, things were running well. But then that professor got a job in industry and
Wow.
he left me after 1 year.
Oh my God.
And that was, to me, I was like, I should just quit. I should just stop right now.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had just earned the Rise grant. You know what the Rise is, right? Basically, it's a grant to help underprivileged or underrepresented graduate students
Hmm.
earn their PhD. And I went to them, told them this happened again. I'm gonna have to start over, sort of again. And they said, okay, you're not going to leave. You're not going to quit. We're going to get you through this. And they placed me in my current advisor, the advisor I'm graduating with lab. And she was like, she saved me, truthfully.
Yeah.
Now, again, and we'll get to this point here in a little bit, but our personalities and our work styles were mismatched, definitely. She was very laid back and hands off, whereas I like to have deadlines. I like someone not micromanaging me, but also saying, "How's it going? Oh, maybe you can do this. I'll talk to you next week."
So,
Um,
so let me stop you there for a second.
sure.
There's a really important point. You
Hmm.
you were basically you were done, and you had a support system, which was the people that were funding your project, basically,
Hmm.
your fellows, which is from the fellowship.
Yep.
So how did their support basically what kind of effect did they have on you
Oh,
during your time at the university during your PhD?
I can't even put it into words how paramount they were to my success. They were there for me not only financially, they gave me a stipend to help me, pay for expenses as I'm doing my work, but they also gave me professional development. They helped me become a leader. They exposed me to grant writing classes. They gave me technical writing classes, EndNote, which everybody needs to know. They just exposed me to so much professional development. Oh, and probably the most important one, imposter syndrome. They did a whole class just on that to help you,
Man,
when you
like if
feel
we
like
could
you
have a
have
whole hour just talking about the imposter syndrome.
for sure. And then the emotional support too. I could text Dr. Taylor, I'll mention her by name. I could text her at 11 o'clock at night and say, I want to stop. This is too much. And then she would just call you and talk to you or email you in the middle of the night and coach you through. And Dr. Berea and Renee Da Silva and then Diane Elizondo, all of them were just always there for you and to
Yeah.
make sure you had what you need. And that was really important to have that support system.
So for those people who don't know, what is a fellowship? So you talked about all these things that you were doing with these people that you mentioned.
Mhm.
Um, can you give a little bit of a background of what a fellowship is and what are you supposed to be doing with that?
Right. So the fellowship is essentially it was a competitive grant through the NSF. Now, the Dr. Taylor and Dr. Brea, what they did was is they applied for funding to help these, grad students to get their PhDs, and then we have to apply to that fellowship in order to get a position. And then in order to fulfill the fellowship, we have to, be performing research and with a biological spin to it. So even though I was in the physics department, I still qualified because my project had a bio center to it. And then we also had to, attend meetings. We had to meet certain, how do you say, I don't want to use the word deadlines, but meet certain criteria in order to stay in that program. So it's kind of just a way to structure your PhD experience and it's just to guide you. It's a nice way to guide you. I think that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. So let me see. I wanted to ask more about the fellowship.
Yeah, please do.
How committed did you have to be time-wise when it came to the fellowship? Did it distract you a
Mm.
lot from your research? How time consuming was it?
That fellowship really, as far as time commitment, was only an hour on Friday. That you were required to be there for their meetings for professional development. You had to do a certain amount of I don't want to call it outreach, but they really wanted you to do their how do you say, struggling to find the word here, if they had like a graduate panel to for you to coach undergrads, you needed to do that a certain amount of times. So it wasn't too much of a time commitment. What they wanted you to do was to get your research done. That's what they were paying you to do, to be in that lab for at a minimum 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they wanted. They are there for you so that you can focus. They want to take care of all the other things, all the financial stress. They want to help coach you up to be a better scientist and put you in that lab so you can focus. That's what they wanted you to do.
So graduate school can have it's a tough balancing act when it comes to time management.
Mm.
How do you manage your time and maintain that focus on your research? Your
That
personal
was
life, your family life, and everything you had to do in school.
Yeah. Time management is super key. And I'll say that I'm a master time manager, but not by choice. It was very learned. Um,
So you're saying it's not something you're born with, it's something that you can definitely acquire.
Maybe it's easier for some rather than others,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, it was not something that was very easy. And I'll tell you where I'm trying to go with this. Um, in 2019 or 2020, no, it wasn't. It was actually 2021. My girlfriend, whom I've been with her for over 13 years at this point. She said, Vincent or Vicente, I want to go to pharmacy school. And she quit her job so she could go to pharmacy school.
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't live without that income. We needed something. So I said, you know what? I got you. And not only was I doing my PhD at the time, but I also taught middle school. I taught
Wow.
middle school for 7. So I had a full-time job while also doing a PhD and fulfilling all the requirements for the fellowship. I had to be a master time manager. I woke up in the morning. I got to school or my job at 7 a.m. and I did all my grading and prep there, 7 till about 9:30, I want to say, because I always taught like no, 8:50 is that's when I taught. And so that's when I did all my prep and grading. I taught during the day. Sometimes I would leave the school during the day to go to attend a meeting that I needed to do, go back. And then when I clocked out at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, I went to the lab. And then I worked from 5:30 till 10 o'clock at night every single day and just did it over and over and over
For
again.
how long did this last?
Till 2023.
So 2 years.
The summer of 2023, I was starting to wrap things up. That's because that December of 2023, I defended my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
But the summer of 2023, I also earned an internship at Tower Semiconductor.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I left
Now the
teaching.
same thing as Tower Jazz.
Yeah, Tower Jazz
Okay.
essentially. So
Yeah.
I left teaching to go pursue that and thought that that would be potentially a career for me. And
Mhm.
so then it kind of, the time thing didn't really change. I still had to had to manage doing the internship, which was 30 hours a week, and also finish up my PhD work. So time management is huge, and not everybody's going to have the same situation that I did. But if I, you have to find the time and you have to be committed to that time. You can't show up at the lab, say like 8 in the morning and say, I'm going to work from 8 to 4 and not work. You know, you can schedule in breaks, but you have to be very intentional about your time. And I
Yeah.
think that's where what the original question was really about is you have to be intentional about your time. Schedule your time, manage your expectations. I'm going to work for 8 hours and then stick to that. And then schedule your time for release. You're going to go crazy if you don't have, say, your 1 hour of gym, or, you go home and need to read a book for an hour to calm yourself. You have to have all these different things plugged in. So that's what it means, is being diligent and intentional about your time.
How supportive was your supervisor? I'm assuming that she know that you were doing basis.
No,
Okay.
I hit it. I hit it because, and this is where we were going to get to, right? I wouldn't want to use the word ashamed, but I also didn't want anyone to know that I was struggling. I didn't want anyone to know that I needed to do, that I was doing that, because I wasn't trying to use it as an excuse. I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to say I can't do my job because I have another job. No, I'm going to make it all work and I'm going to get the work done. And that's how well I hit it too, because they didn't know until after I defended my dissertation. No one knew until after.
Man, that's rough. I can't imagine the stress that you might have had during that time.
It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but I'm a better man for it. I I'm a professional, and I can say that truly. It made me a really independent worker, almost to a fault, because I didn't tell anybody. I kind of had to just do things on my own. Everybody else left at 5 or 6, so I'm in the lab all on my own, and that's not a great thing. I don't recommend that to anyone really, but
You have to
that's just kind of
be
my.
self accountability, basically.
Definitely, definitely. And that's another thing. It's good to be independent, but don't just be independent. It's important to have not only collaborators and people helping you and different inputs coming in, but diverse and a bunch of different people from different backgrounds and different science disciplines talking to you. Because I was stuck for a long time in my dissertation, in my project. I had a plan, I had the experiment outline, but I didn't have the expertise at the time that I needed, like in biology. And it wasn't until I started talking to someone in the biology department. And it wasn't until I started talking to someone in the chemistry department when I started actually making headway on my project. So it's really important to seek help from those. It's not a bad thing to seek help, which is what I avoided for a very long time.
Yeah. Finding mentors is always so important.
Hmm.
And the thing is that people don't need to know that they're your mentors. It just happens organically when you have somebody who's there lending you their hand and helping you along the way, and then you're taking their advice, but they don't even know that you're taking their advice. It's like a mentorship in disguise, and that they're so important. Definitely.
Definitely.
Now, you held roles in both academia and industry. So you had as an electronic warfare engineer, as a
Hmm.
process engineer.
Hmm.
How do you manage to transition from academia to industry?
That's a great question. I found that a lot of the skills that I learned as a PhD in the lab, specifically all the chemistry that I had to do, translated really well to my role in the semiconductor industry. They basically gave me a tool and they said, you are the master of this tool, and I need you to learn how to optimize and develop a method for calibration. And well, scientific method. I knew what tools I had. I developed my own experiment to do exactly what they were talking about. So the transition was really not too hard for me,
Okay.
especially given that it was all chemistry for the most part. Being a physicist, I feel like I do a whole lot of chemistry.
Mhm.
Um, uh, And then, you know, translating to the electronic warfare engineer, that was different. That was definitely something I was not used to. But luckily, when I interviewed for the position, a lot of what they wanted to know is just, well, how are your critical thinking skills? During the interview, they just gave me a bunch of, well, radar physics, just
Hmm.
questions. You know, what's wavelength? Can you
Yeah.
describe? Yeah, exactly. Can you, what are the important parameters of, you know, a radar, like an antenna? You know, can you think your way through it? And I felt like my background in physics helped me with a lot of that. And funny enough, teaching helped me with that, like a whole lot as well, because you know these kids that I'm teaching, even in seventh grade, are learning the basics of you know what a wave is, the amplitude, the wavelength, like all these things.
Yeah.
Well, they helped me during the interview for the electronic warfare engineer, and you know, and then from there, you know, you don't have to be an expert at something when you go into, you know, a field like that. They're gonna teach you, but you know, you need to know the background and you need to have the critical thinking skills in order to be successful. And that's what they're trying to assess is can you think?
Nice. Yeah, thank you for that. Now, you're saying that you taught middle school, but you also taught college.
Hmm.
So, for someone who's taught at both levels, how did you tailor your teaching approach according to the type of student that you had at the time?
Oh wow. You know, it was different. So you know, when I taught college and when I taught middle school, the first thing they did when you, and I'll start with college, is, you know, you're fresh into grad school, and the first thing they do, you have to TA for a year. You have to teach a physics lab.
What's a
And again, that you kind of, I'm sorry,
what is a TA?
a teaching assistant, essentially someone that goes in and we worked with the lab coordinator and they taught us they you know they made us do the lab and say okay well now teach it, teach someone not only how to do the lab but the physics behind it too. And I said, oh, well, I know how this physics is. And I thought to myself, okay, well, how do you explain it? And that's the truth. When you're able to explain something like to some the layman or even a kindergartner, as I think is that's been described before, if you can describe it
Yeah.
to a kindergartner, then you truly know it. So I had to get myself on that level. How would I understand it? And I found that actually came really naturally to me. You know, my mom, she was a educator. She taught fifth grade math and is now a principal in high school, or I'm sorry, middle school. So I kind of already had that mindset going and I
Yeah,
knew
of
how it worked.
course.
And so, you know, the student in college is way different than the student in middle school. You know, in college, you know, you don't care if really, and that's kind of a sad thing to say, but if the amount of effort they put in, it's really up to them. If they're goofing off in the lab, okay, just get out, then leave. Or, well, if you don't listen, then you're just gonna fail. It's kind of different when you transition to middle school. Now, when I transitioned to middle school, again, it was trial by fire. This was right after the pandemic. It was their first
Oh,
year back in the classroom. So these kids had been
oh,
stuck in their houses for a long time.
yeah.
And, then combine that with not having any experience teaching kids, I kind of came in there and said, you know how I'm going to reach these kids? I'm going to be authentic. And that was like the worst mistake I ever made. Because although you're being authentic, if you don't establish that authoritarian presence at the beginning, they're going to walk all over you. And dang it, they did. Um,
In
but,
middle school, man, that is rough.
you know, that was probably my favorite job ever.
Really?
I loved it. You know, even though that first year was essentially hell dealing with discipline, the kids were so relatable and they loved me. Even though I didn't have that because I didn't establish that authoritarian presence at the beginning, the person
Yeah.
who's in charge, yeah, they walked over me, but they also loved that I wasn't afraid to be myself. You know, I'm in there and I'm treating them like people and I'm saying, this is how you do the physics. And I'm also, I know how to explain it at that point because I had teaching. They learned basically the same stuff that the people in the physics labs learned. They learned kinematics, the kinematic formulas. They learned all of that at the middle school level. So I knew how to teach that already. And it was just so rewarding to see these kids light up and to see that I'm just a normal person. I think they experienced my PhD with me, by the way.
Wow.
I
That's
Yeah,
really
if
special.
it was I would tell them, occasionally, like, just as an excerpt, if like I was losing control, I'd be like, you know what I went through the other day, kids? I tell them about a lab thing that went wrong, and then that would kind of help get them on track because they're really interested in you as a
Yeah.
person. They really are. They're invested in that. And but anyways, man, I still tutor one of them to this day.
Oh, that's
I'm
pretty good.
tutoring him through AP Physics 2 right now.
Wow.
And this kid is brilliant. He's self motivated. And I got him to a 4 on the AP Physics 1 test. He did and that's
That's good for
compared to
him.
where he was, where we got at the end, just night and day. And he now he I think that's what makes teaching the most rewarding is when you've left that mark, because he's told me, hey, how can I do what you do? How can I go work in a lab? Can you get me that summer experience? Like, I want to be a scientist. Oh my gosh, my heart,
Yeah.
it's it's so amazing. But
It
so
makes such a big difference when you see that enthusiasm from one of your students.
Mhm.
So, and you also did a lot of outreach, right? So you did
Mhm.
outreach in YMCA. You ran physics programs at the YMCA and mentoring students. So,
Yep.
what inspired you to get involved into that kind of outreach?
I think that it started with the GSPS, the Graduate Society of Physics Students. You were the president before me. I
Yeah,
remember you and Francisco. And I got in there, and I ended up eventually, after Jason took over president, I took over president after him. And we both together worked really well together. Jason, I think you talked to him the other day.
yeah,
We worked really well together and saying, we want to do more than just, sell at on campus. And, we want to reach out to people. And we developed a program. And you know who actually connected us? So someone in the IT department at UTSA said, "Hey, I go to this YMCA. You guys should go there and meet these kids." So we got that contact. We set it up with them, and we developed, just some physics exercises with them. And they were mostly committed. I think what we had to do to reach them was we did the physics of basketball, because all those kids wanted to do was play basketball. So we taught them physics about
oh, that's
basketball,
incredible.
and immediately they loved us. We went over and they looked forward to us coming, because we would go there and they would, get through the science, because that's not really what they wanted, but at least we got them there. At least we put their minds through it. They're exposed to it. And then we would play basketball through them with them at the end. And that
Man,
was
fun.
one of my favorite memories as a grad student. It's just reaching out to these kids and showing them, because some of them come from really, really underprivileged backgrounds, and some of them sleep in that gym at night, and you can tell. And i don't I don't know how to quantify the impact that we made on them, but I show them there's something else, and that there's science, and through education you can get somewhere, because we talked about that too, that there's a pathway you can take if you do well in school, and you can go and do whatever you want. And that was really rewarding to us.
Yeah, so that kind of follows into the next question. How important do you think it is to have groups like the GSPS that went into the YMCA and start mentoring students? How important it is for organizations within universities, within industries, to go out into the community and start reaching out to these children?
Amazingly important. Amazingly, it's these kids have never heard of UTSA. Well, they probably heard of UTSA, but that's just the college in town. But there's so much that you can do with that. They've never heard of physics before, and then all we're doing is just planting a seed. And then once you plant that seed, then they know now this exists. And then it may not work for everyone, but if you just get one of them and get them inspired to pursue science, or to pursue just something, any inspiration at all, that's a win. And that's important for companies to do. That's important for just so many. Just it's just wildly important to make a positive impact on the future, the kids of the community.
Man, thank you for
Yeah.
that. We need more people to do that, to outreach and
Mhm.
help these young students to help them pursue STEM, and not just STEM, just any career. I
Exactly.
think that um, Jay he made a comment last week. He's like he said there's an ass for every seat. So there's always somebody who has potential for something that if they don't know about it,
Hmm.
it's going to be hard for them to reach that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It,
we need people to do outreach at every level.
I just want people to know that you're not predestined to any kind of outcome based on where you're born. Sure, you may be at a disadvantage. I understand that, definitely. But anyone can be anything. And it's really important to let them know that. And that's what we were doing. We were letting them know that you can grow up and you can be a scientist. You can do whatever you want. You know, it doesn't even have to be a scientist, but do something. I don't know. That's it. It just it makes me happy to try to help people. It's important to bring, how do you say, help others find success.
Yeah. Now, what advice would you give the students currently facing challenges in their graduate careers or just academia in general?
I'll start with graduate careers. If you're in grad school, it is, I guess it depends, right? It's important to know, first of all, that you're not alone. And, you know, like in my example, I felt like I was alone, but I wasn't. There was many peers around me and professors around me that are willing and want to help you. You know, your department chair even, that you can just shoot them an email. I'm struggling, and they'll try to help you at least, or if they don't, there's someone out there that'll help you. Specifically for graduate students also, especially ones pursuing their master's or PhD in STEM, I want to say this right away. It is really important to do what I like to call, or what is called, lab rounds. You know, I kind of, the way my path worked was I was stuck in one lab because that was the lab that I experienced as an undergrad, and then he gave me an opportunity in my department chair.
Yeah.
But it is very important to experience a bunch of different labs to see what's best style of advisor works best for you. Talk to the grad students. Do they like working in that lab? What are their schedules like? Do they have to show up at 9 a.m. and work till 9 p.m.? Just get a feel for it. And it's also important to know what you're passionate about too. You know, what kind of research do you want to do? Do you want to, do work on black holes and, study data from the James Webb Telescope? Or do you want to do like me and work with nanomaterials? Well, it's important to find a lab that puts you in the best position to do work in the field that you want to do work in. And then even going back to your question as an undergrad, it's really important to reach out and, how do you say, experience a lot of things as an undergrad. That's one thing I wish I did that I didn't really do, is use your time to experience a whole lot of different things, because that's what undergraduate school is for. Sure, you have a major, but also go find a society. Like one of the societies I found was called GEMS, which is the teaching society. It was my first exposure to teaching. And I didn't know I was going to like teaching, but I kind of learned after attending a couple of those meetings, like, oh, teaching sounds really exciting to me. Go Just go and branch out, and you'll find out a lot about yourself and do a lot of that growing that you need to do as an undergraduate, and travel abroad, because I wasted all the opportunities I had to travel, and now I wish I had done that.
Well, you're still young. There's still time.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure.
So what's next for you? What are specific areas of research, teaching, or industry work that you're excited to pursue?
Um, yeah, so currently, I'm in between jobs and I'm just doing a lot of applying right now. I'm interested in really anything. Like, I have applications. I'd love to be a college professor. That would probably be, if I had to do something for a long time, it would be that. But I also, I'm also interested in pursuing industry positions. Like at the time right now, me and the person that you previously interviewed, Jay, we have a company together that we started. I don't know if he mentioned that. Did he mention
You
that?
did.
All
Yeah.
right, perfect. So
Sorry,
I'll
you
just
did.
do my own little spin on it. Yeah. So based on the research work that I did, the non-enzymatic glucose detection,
Mhm.
or my nickel nanowire glucose sensor, we're kind of doing a spin-off and creating our own non-enzymatic glucose sensor, and we're applying for government grants for funding for that company. So that's another potential avenue I have, and which is exciting. And I'm also applying for government jobs too, because I really did enjoy my time as an electronic warfare engineer. I wish I could have done it longer. And to go back into that field would be very exciting because it was a really cool field.
All
Yeah.
right. Thanks. Now, the last question that I have for you today, for aspiring scientists and engineers, what is the one piece of advice you would like to give them?
Whatever you find to do, or I guess the way to say is whatever you choose to do, be passionate about it. Really want to do it. I think that everything and every choice that you make needs to be in service of your goal. And I wish I hadn't recognized that before I was in grad school. Yeah, so whatever you choose to do, find your goal and do everything you can to achieve it and be passionate about it. You have to be passionate about it or you're always going to half-ass it. So be passionate about what you do.
Well, Dr. Gonzalez, Vincent, Vicente, thank you so much, my friend. It's been a long time since we
Yeah.
spoke, and this has been the hands down really inspiring. Thank you for sharing your story. I think you're going to touch a lot of lives. I think you should keep doing what you have been doing because I can see the passion and the inspiration coming from you when you talk about what you do.
Thank
Um,
you.
don't stop doing that. I think this world needs more people like you. And I say that with my heart in my hand and with true honesty. And I am honored to have had you here today. And I hope we can keep working in the future together.
Absolutely.
I'm sure this is not going to be the last time we meet. So,
Yeah, yeah, you know how to contact me. Yeah, let me know. I'm always willing. I love
yeah.
this.
So, like, if the students wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. So, wait, do I just like share my email or what would be the best way
Whatever,
to?
if you do, however you want, if you
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
wants to ask you
So,
something or questions or anything, how can they reach you?
yeah, totally. Reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. That would be a great way to do that. Yeah, because I'm just, Dr. Vicente Gonzalez on LinkedIn. Just look for the long-haired guy.
Yeah,
And
I'll post your LinkedIn in
oh,
the bio.
wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I'm the one with the nanowires in the background because I'm just so proud of that image. It's one of my coolest
Nice.
electron microscopy images ever. But yeah, no, definitely connect with me, shoot me a message, and I'm always open to talk because I think if there's a common theme in everything that I've gone through and everything that I've said today is that I like to help people. I want people around me to be successful. And so I'm always willing to do that to help someone reach that next step if I can.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Mhm.
Really appreciate you.